It began with a private exchange so sensitive that even senior palace aides were ordered to step outside the room. Behind the closed doors of Kensington Palace, Prince William reportedly heard words he never expected connected to his daughter's future. Hours later, Princess Charlotte's name was suddenly being whispered beside a title no royal child her age was ever expected to receive so soon. And when William finally confessed his shock, the entire balance inside the House of Windsor reportedly shifted overnight. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Reports suggest the confidential briefing took place during one of the most tense private stretches the palace has faced in years. The atmosphere inside royal circles had already become unusually strained following months of speculation surrounding the monarchy's future stability, King Charles' ongoing health concerns since early 2024, and mounting pressure over how the next generation of royals would eventually carry the institution forward. But according to insiders familiar with the meeting, nobody expected Princess Charlotte's name to suddenly emerge at the center of those conversations. Palace aides allegedly entered the room carrying old constitutional files, succession memorandums, and dormant protocol documents that had not reportedly been revisited in decades. What began as a routine strategic discussion quickly transformed into something far heavier, something deeply personal for William himself. Sources close to palace administrative circles claim William initially believed the conversation would focus on scheduling adjustments surrounding upcoming royal duties. Instead, various interpretations of the meeting describe an entirely different tone unfolding behind those doors. Advisors reportedly discussed concerns about the monarchy's long-term resilience in a rapidly changing era, quietly revisiting contingency structures designed to protect the institution during periods of uncertainty. It was during that exchange, insiders whisper, that Charlotte's future role allegedly became the focus of intense attention. One senior figure reportedly referenced the need for historic continuity, while another allegedly raised concerns that the younger generation would soon face pressures unlike anything seen since the final years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. The emotional impact on William reportedly became visible almost immediately afterward. Observers claim he exited the meeting pale, distant, and unusually silent. For a man trained since childhood to conceal emotion beneath discipline, the shift did not go unnoticed. Palace staff allegedly exchanged concerned glances as William walked through Kensington Palace corridors without acknowledging aides waiting nearby. Hours later, during what should have been an ordinary family appearance, media observers noticed something else entirely. Catherine, Princess of Wales, reportedly appeared tense and distracted, her expression carrying what some royal commentators described as quiet alarm. Though no public explanation was given, insiders now claim the emotional weight of that earlier conversation had already begun affecting the family privately. Then came the whispers. Slowly at first. Quiet conversations between staff members. Brief remarks exchanged during security rotations. Fragments overheard near private offices. According to reports emerging from palace administrative streams, aides were suddenly instructed to avoid discussing succession-related matters in open areas. Even more unusual, some insiders allege certain staff members were reminded of older confidentiality protocols rarely enforced in recent years. That alone reportedly intensified speculation inside royal circles. Why such secrecy? Why now? And why did Charlotte's name suddenly appear tied to discussions involving titles and responsibilities far beyond what anyone expected for a young royal still growing up beneath the public eye? As the rumors spread deeper into media circles, royal observers began connecting several strange developments that had previously seemed unrelated. William reportedly became noticeably more protective of Charlotte during recent outings, often keeping her unusually close during public moments. Commentators who had followed the family for years quietly remarked that his body language had changed. There was reportedly a new caution in the way he interacted with his daughter, almost as though he suddenly understood something the outside world did not. At the same time, sources claim old royal protocols connected to female succession structures and ceremonial positioning were quietly re-examined behind palace walls. Some insiders even suggested dormant title plans dating back generations had been reopened for review as part of broader discussions surrounding the monarchy's future stability. Yet what disturbed many observers most was number apps. T simply the possibility of a title adjustment itself. Titles inside the monarchy change constantly through time, ceremony, marriage, and succession. What truly sent shockwaves through palace circles was the growing belief that officials were considering these changes far earlier than expected because of fears surrounding the institution's long-term future. According to reports, conversations once viewed as distant preparations had suddenly become urgent matters requiring immediate attention. And for William, that realization allegedly carried a devastating emotional cost. Because beneath the language of duty, continuity, and constitutional planning was a far more painful truth: a father beginning to understand that history may already be reaching for his daughter far sooner than he ever imagined possible. But what truly shook William was not just the title itself, it was the reason palace officials allegedly believed Charlotte needed it now. Long before the public ever heard Princess Charlotte's name tied to a powerful new royal designation, reports suggest Queen Elizabeth II quietly explored contingency plans for the monarchy's future. Hidden deep within private discussions surrounding succession, duty, and stability was allegedly one possibility considered almost unthinkable at the time: accelerating Charlotte's royal standing decades earlier than tradition would normally allow. According to sources familiar with the final years of Elizabeth II's reign, concerns surrounding the future of the monarchy had reportedly intensified long before the public understood how fragile the institution's internal confidence had become. While the world still viewed the crown as immovable and eternal, insiders whisper that private conversations behind palace walls painted a far more uncertain picture. The late Queen allegedly spent increasing amounts of time discussing continuity, legacy, and the emotional resilience required for the younger generation to survive the pressures awaiting them. Reports claim she feared the monarchy was approaching an era unlike any it had faced before, an age driven by relentless public scrutiny, shifting political attitudes, fractured trust in institutions, and growing instability surrounding royal identity itself. It was during these deeply guarded discussions, according to various interpretations from palace historians and administrative insiders, that ancient title structures connected to royal daughters were quietly revisited. Some of these protocols had reportedly remained untouched for generations, buried beneath layers of ceremonial tradition and constitutional caution. Yet palace researchers were allegedly instructed to review them once again, particularly those concerning how royal women historically stabilized the monarchy during periods of uncertainty. The discussions reportedly centered not only on succession itself, but on the symbolic power of loyalty, discipline, and public trust. And somewhere within those confidential reviews, Charlotte's name allegedly began appearing with increasing frequency. For Prince William, the realization reportedly came much later. Sources claim he only fully understood the scale of Elizabeth's long-term thinking after discovering confidential notes connected to her private succession concerns. Various reports suggest those documents contained reflections about preserving institutional stability far into the future, especially during moments when the monarchy could face emotional or constitutional vulnerability. According to insiders, William was deeply unsettled not simply because Charlotte had been considered important, but because plans involving her future may have been quietly discussed years earlier without public awareness. The discovery allegedly forced him to confront a painful truth that the monarchy had already begun shaping his daughter's destiny long before he was emotionally prepared to accept it himself. As those revelations surfaced privately within royal circles, another influential figure reportedly emerged as one of Charlotte's strongest advocates. Sources whisper that Princess Anne strongly supported strengthening Charlotte's future role inside the institution. Anne, long regarded as one of the monarchy's most disciplined and relentless guardians of duty, allegedly believed the younger princess possessed qualities increasingly rare within modern royal life. Reports suggest Anne saw echoes of Elizabeth II's restraint, composure, and quiet endurance in Charlotte's behavior during private ceremonial preparation. Palace insiders even claim Anne privately argued that the monarchy's future survival would depend not only on heirs, but on the strength of those standing beside them during inevitable storms ahead. Then came the development that reportedly transformed quiet contingency planning into urgent strategic discussion: King Charles III's ongoing health struggles since early 2024. According to palace administrative streams, fears surrounding institutional vulnerability suddenly intensified behind the scenes. Royal insiders allegedly worried that the next generation might face enormous pressure far sooner than expected, forcing senior figures to reconsider long-term preparation timelines. What once appeared like distant constitutional planning now carried immediate emotional weight. And amid those fears, Charlotte reportedly began attracting increasing attention during private ceremonial training sessions, where insiders claim she displayed unusual confidence, discipline, and composure for someone her age. That growing confidence allegedly strengthened the belief among certain palace figures that Charlotte's future role would eventually become far greater than the public currently understood. Reports suggest the rumored title adjustment was never intended merely as symbolic recognition, but as preparation for responsibilities connected to protecting the monarchy itself during an unpredictable future. For William and Catherine, however, that realization reportedly carried devastating emotional implications. Because beneath every discussion of titles, duty, and royal continuity remained the painful reality that childhood inside the House of Windsor rarely belongs fully to the child living it. But as whispers turned into strategy, another question began haunting palace corridors: why was this happening so suddenly? According to various interpretations of recent palace conversations, Prince William did not react to Princess Charlotte's reported new title with celebration at first. He reacted with silence. The kind of silence aides reportedly described as deeply personal, because for William, this was never just about royal prestige. It was about realizing his daughter's childhood may already be slipping away beneath the crushing machinery of monarchy. Sources close to palace administrative circles claim the emotional shock hit William harder than many inside the royal household expected. For years, he had reportedly worked carefully to create a different upbringing for his children than the one he experienced himself. Insiders whisper that William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, privately prioritized normality wherever possible, shielding George, Charlotte, and Louis from the suffocating pressures that historically consumed royal childhoods. But according to various reports emerging from inside palace walls, the sudden acceleration of conversations surrounding Charlotte's future role shattered the fragile illusion that time was still on their side. William allegedly admitted during private discussions that he was caught completely off guard by how quickly contingency planning had escalated into serious institutional preparation. That realization reportedly carried an especially painful emotional weight because William understood exactly what royal duty could demand from a person over time. Palace insiders claim one of his deepest fears centered around the life endured by Princess Anne, whose relentless discipline and lifelong sacrifice had long earned respect across royal circles, but also quietly symbolized the unforgiving cost of service. Anne became known as the monarchy's iron shield precisely because she never stopped carrying responsibility, never stopped enduring pressure, and never allowed personal comfort to outweigh duty. Reports suggest William feared Charlotte could one day inherit a similar burden, a future defined not by freedom, but by obligation. And according to insiders familiar with his thinking, that possibility deeply unsettled him. The emotional strain allegedly spread quickly through the family. Sources claim Catherine became visibly emotional during several private conversations following the palace briefing, especially as discussions intensified around Charlotte's potential long-term responsibilities. Though the Princess of Wales reportedly understood the institutional logic behind the planning, insiders whisper that the emotional reality felt far more devastating inside the privacy of family life. Because unlike royal advisors discussing continuity, William and Catherine were not debating constitutional strategy. They were confronting the terrifying possibility that their daughter's future was already being quietly rewritten by forces far larger than themselves. Observers began noticing subtle changes soon afterward. During public appearances, Charlotte reportedly appeared more reserved than usual, more cautious beneath the intense attention now surrounding her. Royal commentators who had followed the family closely for years quietly remarked on the difference. Some described her demeanor as more composed, others as more aware. And while no public acknowledgement emerged from the palace, insiders claim William became increasingly protective behind closed doors, pushing repeatedly for Charlotte to remain shielded from excessive royal burdens while she was still young. Yet each attempt to slow the momentum allegedly collided with the same harsh reality. The institution had already begun preparing for a future it believed might arrive sooner than expected. Reports suggest William's anxiety deepened further after he personally reviewed old royal archives connected to female succession roles and constitutional support structures surrounding future monarchs. Those documents allegedly revealed how royal daughters throughout history often became stabilizing figures during periods of institutional turbulence, sacrificing privacy and personal freedom in service of preserving the crown itself. According to palace insiders, William was deeply affected by parallels being quietly drawn between Charlotte and some of those historical precedents. The realization reportedly forced him to confront something profoundly painful, that Charlotte's future might no longer belong entirely to her own choosing. The emotional pressure surrounding the situation allegedly intensified because William already carries the enormous constitutional responsibility of preparing Prince George for kingship one day. Sources whisper that the idea of both his children becoming central pillars of the monarchy's future created a level of emotional conflict difficult even for senior royals to fully understand. On one side stood duty, tradition, and the survival of the institution. On the other stood fatherhood, protection, and the desperate desire to preserve his children's innocence for as long as possible. And according to those closest to the family, William increasingly found himself trapped painfully between those two worlds. But while William wrestled privately with emotion, powerful royal figures were already moving the plan forward behind the scenes. If Prince William represented the emotional heart of the crisis, then Princess Anne reportedly became its iron architect. Palace administrative streams now whisper that Anne quietly revived what insiders have begun calling the Heirs Accord, a long-term strategy designed to secure the monarchy through the next generation before instability could threaten the institution itself. According to reports emerging from senior royal circles, Anne viewed the situation surrounding Princess Charlotte very differently from William. Where William reportedly saw a young daughter whose childhood deserved protection, Anne allegedly saw a future pillar of the monarchy already beginning to emerge beneath enormous historical pressure. Sources close to palace operations claim Anne believed the institution could no longer afford to wait for crises to unfold before preparing its next generation properly. The monarchy, according to insiders familiar with her thinking, was entering a period of dangerous uncertainty shaped by political division, global skepticism toward institutions, and growing instability surrounding public trust. In Anne's reported view, hesitation itself had become a risk the crown could no longer afford. That belief allegedly pushed Anne to advocate aggressively for Charlotte to receive stronger institutional positioning far earlier than tradition would normally allow. Palace insiders whisper that Anne repeatedly argued the monarchy's long-term survival depended not only on preparing heirs, but on strengthening the figures surrounding them before future storms arrived. According to various interpretations of private palace discussions, Anne believed Charlotte possessed qualities that could become essential to preserving royal continuity in the decades ahead. Sources claim she quietly compared Charlotte's composure, discipline, and instinctive awareness during ceremonial preparation to the traits once associated with Queen Elizabeth II herself. Those comparisons reportedly carried enormous weight behind palace walls. As these discussions intensified, insiders claim Anne formally revived what is now whispered about as the Heirs Accord. Though no public acknowledgement of such a strategy exists, palace administrative streams allegedly describe it as a long-term continuity framework centered around reinforcing the monarchy through both Prince George and Charlotte together. Rather than relying solely on one future sovereign carrying the institution alone, the strategy reportedly focused on creating a stronger generational structure capable of withstanding future instability. Sources suggest Anne viewed this approach as essential after watching the monarchy endure years of internal fractures, public controversies, and institutional strain that increasingly exposed vulnerabilities beneath the surface of royal life. Senior courtiers reportedly became deeply alarmed by what they viewed as intensifying external pressures against the monarchy worldwide. According to insiders, discussions surrounding constitutional relevance, modern public expectations, and long-term institutional resilience quietly accelerated behind palace walls after King Charles' health struggles became impossible to ignore internally. some reports suggest. Just palace officials feared a dangerous vacuum could emerge during future transitions if younger royals were not prepared emotionally and institutionally far earlier than previous generations had been. That fear allegedly strengthened Anne's influence considerably, particularly among senior figures who viewed her decades of disciplined service as proof that survival inside the monarchy required relentless preparation rather than emotional hesitation. Sources claim William and Anne subsequently held several deeply private meetings inside Kensington Palace and later at Windsor Castle, where difficult conversations reportedly unfolded about Charlotte's future role. According to palace insiders, those discussions often carried enormous emotional tension because William remained torn between constitutional responsibility and fatherhood itself. Anne allegedly pushed for strategic preparation, while William reportedly continued urging caution and emotional protection for his daughter. Yet despite those differences, sources suggest both ultimately understood the same painful truth. The monarchy's future may demand sacrifices from Charlotte far sooner than anyone once imagined. Meanwhile, palace observers reportedly noticed Charlotte growing steadily more confident during ceremonial appearances and private preparation sessions. Royal commentators quietly remarked that senior figures appeared increasingly attentive to her composure during formal moments, especially during events requiring discipline and public restraint. Insiders claim those observations only strengthened support for Anne's long-term planning. At the same time, Catherine allegedly worked carefully behind the scenes to ensure Charlotte remained emotionally grounded while gradually adapting to growing expectations surrounding her future. Reports suggest the Princess of Wales strongly supported preparation, but remained determined that her daughter would not lose herself entirely beneath the crushing machinery of royal obligation. As momentum surrounding the heir's accord quietly expanded, insiders whisper that dormant constitutional discussions, once considered distant hypotheticals, were suddenly reopened for review. Conversations involving ceremonial hierarchy, long-term institutional support roles, and generational continuity allegedly returned to the center of palace strategy with startling urgency. And while Anne reportedly believed these preparations were necessary to protect the crown itself, not everyone inside royal circles viewed Charlotte's growing importance with the same confidence or the same loyalty. But while Anne focused on protecting the crown, another royal faction reportedly viewed Charlotte's growing influence very differently. What began as a private family adjustment reportedly evolved into something far more dangerous: a widening fracture inside the royal household itself. Because according to insiders familiar with palace tensions, not everyone welcomed the idea of Princess Charlotte receiving a stronger royal role so early. Some allegedly feared it would permanently reshape the balance of influence around the future monarchy. At first, the disagreements reportedly surfaced only in whispers behind closed palace doors. Small tensions. Careful disagreements buried beneath formal language and diplomatic restraint. But according to sources familiar with internal discussions, those quiet concerns soon hardened into something far more serious. Reports suggest a divide gradually emerged between traditionalists who believed royal structures should remain untouched for generations and modernizers who feared the institution could collapse under future pressure if it failed to adapt quickly enough. What made the situation especially explosive, insiders claim, was that both sides believed they were fighting to protect the monarchy itself. Yet their visions for survival could not have been more different. Some palace figures allegedly worried that Charlotte's growing prominence would fundamentally alter how influence operated within the next royal generation. According to various interpretations of internal conversations, certain senior figures feared the monarchy risked creating an imbalance by accelerating one royal child's institutional positioning so dramatically at such a young age. Insiders whisper that concerns quietly spread about how expanded responsibilities for Charlotte might affect future ceremonial hierarchy, public perception, and long-term royal dynamics surrounding the younger generation. Though nobody reportedly questioned Charlotte personally, some feared the symbolism surrounding her growing importance could eventually overshadow others in ways the palace might struggle to control later. At the same time, media observers began noticing signs that powerful alliances were quietly forming behind the scenes. Royal commentators pointed to increasing coordination between Prince William, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward during recent palace appearances, and institutional planning discussions. Sources close to administrative circles claim the three figures allegedly held multiple confidential meetings focused on long-term continuity strategy, constitutional preparation, and preserving stability around the future reign of Prince George. Those developments reportedly intensified anxiety among palace traditionalists who feared major structural thinking was already shifting beneath the surface of royal life. Then came the constitutional debates. According to insiders, older succession doctrines once considered irrelevant in modern times were suddenly being discussed again behind palace walls with startling seriousness. Reports suggest advisors quietly revisited historical frameworks connected to royal support structures, ceremonial authority, and institutional resilience during periods of instability. Some insiders even whispered that comparisons were being drawn to previous eras when strong royal daughters played critical roles in protecting the crown during moments of national uncertainty. The mere existence of those conversations reportedly alarmed certain palace factions who feared the monarchy was moving toward a more strategically centralized structure around William's immediate family. For William, however, the growing conflict allegedly became emotionally exhausting. Sources claim he grew increasingly frustrated by leaks surrounding Charlotte's future, especially as rumors intensified across royal media circles. According to palace insiders, William reportedly viewed the speculation as deeply unfair to his daughter, believing she was being pulled into institutional battles she was far too young to fully understand. Each new headline, each whispered report, each anonymous palace comment allegedly deepened his anger behind closed doors. Insiders claim he repeatedly pushed for tighter confidentiality measures, arguing that Charlotte deserved privacy while the family privately navigated the emotional consequences of what was unfolding around them. Meanwhile, Catherine, Princess of Wales, reportedly fought quietly to preserve a sense of emotional normality for Charlotte despite the growing storm. Sources whisper that Catherine became increasingly distressed as palace speculation spilled further into public conversation, especially as commentators began framing Charlotte not simply as a royal child, but as a potential stabilizing force for the monarchy's future. According to insiders, Catherine understood the constitutional realities facing the institution, yet remained deeply determined that her daughter would not lose herself beneath the crushing expectations now beginning to gather around her name. As palace tensions intensified, royal commentators increasingly connected the controversy surrounding Charlotte's future to much larger fears about institutional survival itself. Reports suggest senior figures worried the monarchy was entering a dangerous era where public trust, generational transition, and internal unity would all face unprecedented strain simultaneously. That fear allegedly transformed the title discussions into one of the most tightly guarded and politically sensitive palace matters seen in years. And despite every effort to contain the situation, the pressure building behind royal walls was becoming impossible to hide any longer. And then came the moment that changed everything. William finally broke his silence. When Prince William finally acknowledged the whispers surrounding Princess Charlotte's reported new royal title, palace insiders claim even senior aides were stunned by how personal his reaction appeared. This was not the composed future king delivering rehearsed constitutional language. According to those familiar with the moment, this was a father confronting the terrifying reality that history may already be choosing his daughter's destiny for her. Reports suggest the atmosphere surrounding William's private acknowledgement carried none of the cold formality normally associated with royal succession discussions. Sources close to palace administrative circles claim his words were emotional, reflective, and at times visibly strained beneath the pressure that had been quietly building for months behind palace walls. According to insiders, William reportedly admitted he never expected conversations about Charlotte's expanded role to happen this early in her life. That single realization allegedly shook him more deeply than many within the institution anticipated. Because for William, the issue was never simply about titles, ceremony, or constitutional positioning. It was about watching the machinery of monarchy begin pulling his daughter toward a future he once believed was still years away. Those familiar with the discussions claim William described the entire situation as deeply emotional, particularly because he reportedly understood better than almost anyone the invisible sacrifices royal duty eventually. Why demands? Sources whisper that he increasingly viewed Charlotte not merely as his daughter, but as someone the institution itself had begun preparing for extraordinary importance. And according to insiders, that realization carried a devastating emotional contradiction. The very qualities making Charlotte so admired within palace circles, her discipline, composure, calmness under pressure, and growing awareness during ceremonial moments, were the same qualities quietly convincing senior royals that she could one day become essential to preserving the monarchy's future stability. Throughout the growing turmoil, Catherine, Princess of Wales, reportedly remained focused on protecting one thing above all else: Charlotte's sense of normal childhood. Palace insiders claim Catherine worked tirelessly behind the scenes to preserve routines, family stability, and emotional grounding despite the intensifying pressure surrounding her daughter's future. According to reports, Catherine understood that once the palace formally begins shaping a royal child's long-term institutional role, the process rarely slows down again. That fear allegedly became especially painful as media speculation intensified and Charlotte's name began appearing more frequently in royal commentary connected to continuity, succession, and the monarchy's future survival. Observers quickly noticed the shift. Following William's emotional acknowledgement, reports suggest public attention surrounding Charlotte grew dramatically almost overnight. Royal commentators began analyzing her appearances more closely, studying her behavior during ceremonies, her posture beside George, even her composure during brief public interactions. Sources claim senior palace officials quietly viewed those moments with increasing interest as well. According to insiders, Charlotte's calm public demeanor reportedly impressed several experienced royal figures who believed she displayed unusual confidence for someone her age. While most children under such scrutiny might appear overwhelmed, Charlotte allegedly maintained the same composed restraint that many palace veterans associated with the late Queen Elizabeth II. That comparison reportedly carried enormous significance behind palace walls. Royal insiders now whisper that Elizabeth II's influence still shapes current succession thinking from beyond the grave, particularly through private guidance, long-term contingency planning, and institutional philosophies surrounding duty and continuity. Sources suggest many senior royals increasingly view Charlotte through the lens of those final conversations Elizabeth allegedly held regarding the monarchy's future stability. And according to insiders, William's growing emotional conflict intensified precisely because he understood how much weight the late Queen's thinking still carried within the institution. Once certain ideas take root inside the monarchy, they rarely disappear quietly. As discussions continued privately, reports claim the palace gradually began preparing for a future where Charlotte could hold unprecedented importance inside the next generation of royal life. Sources whisper that conversations surrounding ceremonial preparation, institutional positioning, and long-term continuity planning allegedly accelerated behind closed doors. Though no public confirmation emerged, insiders insist the emotional tone surrounding those preparations changed dramatically after William finally acknowledged how deeply the situation affected him personally. Because for the first time, the future king reportedly stopped speaking like a strategist managing constitutional realities and started speaking like a father terrified of how much destiny the crown might already be placing upon his daughter's shoulders. Yet according to those closest to the unfolding situation, William's emotional confession revealed something even more unsettling beneath the surface. The title itself may never have been the true objective at all. Instead, insiders now whisper it could represent only the first stage of a much larger transformation quietly unfolding within the House of Windsor as senior royal figures prepare for an uncertain future, unlike any the monarchy has faced in generations. But the most chilling part of William's confession was still to come because insiders claim the title may only be the beginning. Behind the palace gates, reports now suggest an entirely new vision for the future House of Windsor may already be forming. Not centered on one heir alone, but on a carefully constructed alliance between Prince George and Princess Charlotte. And according to royal insiders, that realization is exactly what left Prince William so profoundly shaken. For generations, the monarchy traditionally revolved around a single figure destined to inherit the crown, while others remained supporting figures orbiting around that future sovereign. But according to reports emerging from Palace Administrative Street, AMs, senior royal strategists are now quietly considering something far more ambitious for the next era of the House of Windsor. Sources suggest the institution may already be preparing for a future where George and Charlotte operate not simply as siblings inside the royal family, but as a carefully balanced partnership designed to stabilize the monarchy through decades of uncertainty ahead. And insiders claim that possibility carries enormous implications not only for the crown itself, but for the emotional future of William's entire family. According to various interpretations of private palace discussions, Charlotte may eventually carry responsibilities unlike those historically assigned to royal daughters in previous generations. Sources whisper that senior advisors increasingly view her as a critical institutional figure capable of strengthening continuity around George during periods of future constitutional pressure. The discussions reportedly intensified after growing fears surrounding global distrust in institutions, political instability, and the emotional strain future monarchs may face in a rapidly changing world. Palace strategists allegedly concluded that the next sovereign may no longer be able to carry the psychological and symbolic burden of monarchy alone. And within those conversations, Charlotte's role reportedly began expanding far beyond ceremonial expectations. No figure reportedly pushed that thinking more forcefully than Princess Anne. Sources close to palace operations claim Anne increasingly views Charlotte as one of the monarchy's strongest future protectors, a stabilizing presence capable of reinforcing discipline, continuity, and public trust around George's eventual reign. According to insiders, Anne allegedly believes the younger princess possesses many of the same emotional qualities that once allowed Queen Elizabeth II to endure decades of institutional pressure without allowing the monarchy itself to fracture publicly. Those comparisons reportedly became especially influential among senior palace figures who fear the crown may soon enter one of the most difficult transitional periods in modern royal history. For William, however, the growing strategic importance surrounding Charlotte allegedly feels deeply painful beneath the surface. Sources claim he increasingly fears the emotional cost such responsibility could place on his daughter over time. According to insiders, William understands better than most how royal duty slowly reshapes a person's identity, replacing freedom with obligation and innocence with expectation. Palace figures whisper that he worries Charlotte may eventually sacrifice parts of herself simply to preserve stability around the institution. That fear reportedly intensified each time senior advisors discussed her future, not merely as a child within the monarchy, but as an essential pillar supporting its survival. Meanwhile, Catherine, Princess of Wales, allegedly continues fighting quietly to preserve normality wherever possible. Sources suggest Catherine remains determined that Charlotte must still experience childhood before the machinery of royal responsibility fully closes around her. According to palace insiders, Catherine reportedly insists on maintaining routines, emotional grounding, and private family stability even as speculation surrounding Charlotte's future role continues escalating publicly. Yet with every passing month, that task allegedly becomes more difficult as internal planning inside palace walls accelerates at extraordinary speed. Reports claim discussions surrounding ceremonial restructuring, long-term institutional preparation, and future public positioning intensified dramatically after concerns about global confidence in institutions worsened behind the scenes. Senior aides allegedly began reviewing how future royal duties could eventually be distributed differently across the next generation to preserve stability under increasing public pressure. Royal commentators now whisper that Charlotte is no longer being viewed simply as the younger sister of a future king, but as a central figure within the monarchy's long-term survival narrative itself. And according to insiders, that transformation has already begun reshaping how powerful figures inside the palace view the future of the crown. What makes the situation even more chilling, however, is the growing belief that these plans are no longer theoretical. Sources claim preparations connected to George and Charlotte's future partnership may already be quietly underway beneath layers of secrecy, constitutional caution, and carefully controlled palace silence. Because inside the House of Windsor, history rarely announces itself openly when it begins changing course. More often, it happens quietly through private meetings, strategic shifts, and decisions that only reveal their true significance years later when the future has already arrived. And as the palace prepares for a future collapse, EW saw coming, one final truth now hangs over the House of Windsor. For years, Princess Charlotte was viewed simply as the cheerful younger daughter standing beside the future king. But now, according to whispers emerging from the highest levels of palace administration, she may represent something far greater: the monarchy's unexpected safeguard in an era of uncertainty. And Prince William's confession reportedly revealed just how unprepared he felt for that reality to arrive so soon. According to sources close to palace operations, the growing discussions surrounding Charlotte's future were never truly about ceremony alone. Insiders claim the rumored title adjustment symbolized something much deeper: a long-term preparation strategy quietly designed to reinforce the monarchy before future instability could place unbearable pressure on the next generation. What once appeared to the public as harmless royal tradition allegedly carried enormous institutional meaning behind closed doors. Senior figures reportedly feared the crown was entering a dangerous period where public trust, constitutional continuity, and emotional resilience inside the royal family itself would all be tested at once. And within those fears, Charlotte increasingly became viewed not simply as a child within the monarchy, but as one of the figures who may eventually help hold it together. For William, that realization reportedly changed everything. Sources whisper that his emotional confession reflected a father slowly understanding the future burden of the monarchy may not rest solely upon Prince George, after all. Instead, insiders claim palace strategists increasingly envision a future where both George and Charlotte become central pillars supporting the institution through decades of pressure ahead. According to reports, that possibility deeply unsettled William because he knows firsthand what royal destiny can take from a person over time. He understands the isolation, the scrutiny, the relentless expectation to sacrifice comfort, privacy, and even personal identity in service of something larger than oneself. And according to insiders, the thought of both his children carrying that burden reportedly left him emotionally shaken in ways few people inside palace walls had ever witnessed before. Meanwhile, Catherine, Princess of Wales, allegedly remains determined to protect Charlotte emotionally despite the growing institutional pressure surrounding her future. Sources suggest Catherine continues fighting quietly to preserve moments of normal childhood, even as discussions surrounding royal preparation intensify behind palace walls. According to palace insiders, Catherine reportedly understands the danger of allowing constitutional expectation to consume a child too early. Yet every attempt to preserve balance allegedly collides with the same harsh truth. Once the monarchy begins preparing someone for historic responsibility, the process rarely reverses itself completely. That fear now reportedly shadows nearly every private conversation surrounding Charlotte's future. No one inside the royal household appears to understand that reality more clearly than Princess Anne. Reports suggest Anne firmly believes duty must always come before comfort when protecting the crown, even when the emotional consequences feel painful for the family involved. According to insiders, Anne allegedly views the monarchy not simply as a family institution, but as a centuries-old national responsibility that survives only through sacrifice, preparation, and discipline. Sources whisper that her unwavering position has become one of the strongest forces shaping the palace's current long-term strategy surrounding the younger generation. And while William reportedly struggles emotionally with what lies ahead for his children, Anne allegedly sees preparation itself as the only path capable of protecting them from even greater future instability. Adding even greater weight to the situation are growing claims that Queen Elizabeth II may have quietly anticipated this generational transition years before the public ever suspected it. Palace insiders now whisper that many of the current discussions surrounding continuity, partnership between George and Charlotte, and long-term institutional survival reflect concerns the late Queen privately expressed during her final years. According to reports, Elizabeth increasingly worried about how rapidly the world around the monarchy was changing and whether future generations would face pressures unlike anything previous sovereigns endured. Some insiders even believe Charlotte's growing importance inside palace strategy today reflects preparations rooted directly in Elizabeth's final thinking about the crown's survival long after her passing. At the center of all these discussions remains Charlotte herself, Sources claim senior royal figures continue expressing quiet admiration for her composure during public appearances and ceremonies. IAL preparation. Palace observers reportedly view her calm demeanor, emotional control, and growing confidence as signs she may already possess the resilience necessary for extraordinary responsibility one day. And according to insiders, that belief has only strengthened the palace's view that the younger generation now represents the monarchy's greatest hope for restoring long-term stability during an uncertain future. But beneath every strategic discussion, every constitutional review, and every whispered conversation about continuity remains one painful emotional truth William's confession ultimately exposed more clearly than anything else. Preparing children for destiny comes with a devastating personal cost. Because while institutions speak in terms of stability, survival, and duty, parents experience those same decisions very differently. They experience them as the slow realization that history may already be reaching for their children long before childhood itself has truly ended. Because inside the House of Windsor, titles are never just honors, they are warnings that history has already chosen who must carry the crown next. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.